Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another surprise edition of Awaken the World. We are live right now inside the Awaken the World group. It is the 26th day of January in the year 2022, if we're bothering to keep track of such things these days in this sort of way. Time. Boy, time does fly. 7:14, 7:15 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I am I'm Garhen, I guess. The Tiger, too. So, hi. Much love to you, wherever you are right now. We are all one people. We all come from one place. We're all made of the same burnt star toast, no matter what. And it's time as a species that we wake up to that reality in every way. And that will give us the ability to see our way through the difficult path we have ahead of us. So what are we going to talk about tonight? Well, we're going to talk about a few different things. I have a list on a sticky note, hastily scribbled. Now, one of the things that I do want to touch base on is, before we get to the main conversation, I had talked about intuition in either a post or a previous video, and I just want to make something a little more concrete when it comes to intuition. And this is a common issue, and the reason the issue arises, as with all issues, is really getting a grasp on the difference between your conceptual sense of self and the voice in your head and the non-verbal communication of your intuition. Now, I will tell you from my near-death experiences, from what I have experienced in deep states of Satori, and what I have learned from my times in monasteries and with gurus, and my time spent with Sathya Sai Baba, that in reality, no one has ever been spoken to by God. Now, I know that sounds really strange, and a lot of people are going to go, whoa, it's all over the place. But we have to really think about this for a minute. And once you understand why that is, you will understand what the concern can be as well. So, anything that comes from that higher place in ourselves, which indeed is really only one self experiencing itself in mirrored form, has to go through an interpretation process. So what we would call our intuition is in fact no different than God speaking to us. That non-verbal vibratory experience, and really that's a very limited way of labeling it, but we are constrained by these words to describe what is quite frankly beyond words. And what happens is the egoic sense of self, the I you think you are, it becomes aware of that vibration, because of course the body is experiencing it. It reacts to it in its own vibratory dance, if you will. And you, as an egoic being within your mind, depending on how aware you are going to recognize that there's an incoming message, or that there's a message going on, and your current state of being as an egoic identity, the stillness of your mind, the openness of your being, the feeling state you're in at the time, whether you're angry, all of these things come into play in the egoic being's interpretation of that nonverbal communication. Now, sometimes those nonverbal communications are so overwhelmingly powerful that the whole being reacts and is usually in that case, it's tied around, the essence of the physical survival of the being as a whole, mind and body. And usually that is you're already running before you realize that you should be running, or something similar to that. But a lot of the communication that happens throughout the day, and it does happen all day long, is very subtle in nature. And depending on how distracted you are, depending on your state of mind at the time, all these things come into play in your interpretation of your intuition. Because people say, well, my intuition turned out to be wrong. Intuition is never wrong. What gets messed up is the interpreter. So that's one of the deeper understandings that has to be grasped at this level of us being here, experiencing ourselves as an individuated, apparently quite physical, all stuffed into the head, looking out of the eyes sort of being. Is that everything coming in has to be processed. And this is why in near-death experiences, no matter what the near-death experience is, everybody sees what they can relate to in their near-death experience. Because it has to be processed. It has to be played out through the mind and then expressed. So what are we seeing played out and expressed in the world right now? Let's set intuition aside. And the one more last quick thing I'll say about intuition is if you want to check your own intuition, which I always do as a matter of habit, it's not that I don't trust it, I'm always looking for clearer and deeper levels of communication from it. Check how it sits with your own values, whatever it is that you're intuiting or feel you're receiving and interpreting. See if it sits and lines up with the truth of your being. See if it represents the highest aspects of yourself. No one gets an intuition that they should punch somebody first because they're going to get hit. That's not your intuition. It really isn't. So let's get on with the real conversation here, and that is what's happening, what's going on right now. And this is something that can also be difficult to explain, but one of the best ways to explain it is by looking at a herd of sheep. Now, as long as they're convinced that there's no gate to go through, even though there is a gate to go through, they won't go through the gate. And even though each sheep sees the opening, they don't see the opening, and they continue on with the other sheep. And that's maybe not the best analogy, but that's a starting place. And we can think of all of those sheep or all of these people as really possessing sort of a group consciousness. The egoic cloud that humanity is not individuated. The sense of I is individuated, but the stream of thoughts that you have no control over, are literally streaming in based on your vibrational state, wherever you're tuned to. You are, in fact, a mobile receiver transmitter, always transmitting data into that human cloud, the egoic cloud, And that's the source of your subconsciousness and the source of all the perceived darkness that lies within that whole of humanity cloud. And the more rarefied and the more we awaken as humanity, the more rarefied the egoic cloud of humanity becomes. But the point being is that there's all these people who are literally becoming subsumed by the fear and the associated anger that goes with fear. And we must keep in mind that, for example, here in Canada, that this whole thing really shouldn't be an issue at all in reality, because the data holds out. 85% or better of all the truckers and pretty much every single Canadian are at least double vaccinated. The US has the same rule on their side of the border. It's not like it's just Canada doing it. It's kind of a reciprocal arrangement. The issue, as with all issues, is not about vaccines. It's about the fact that our very way of living, our very way of functioning has been and is destructive, not only to the environment, like honestly, the outside world that we're looking at, the destruction in our ecospheres, the destruction in our biospheres, the sudden global warming, the increased intensity of the storms, all of that is rooted in us. The external world is but a reflection of our internal state. Our civilization, as we know it, is breathing its last breaths. And if you look back historically, if you take an honest an honest look at any major civilization, this same inner civilization crumbling out of fear and anger is already underway.
So when you have a moment, Nicole's gonna.
What is then driving the ego to this thinking that a movement like this convoy is needed? Well, see, that's the trick, and we're going to talk about that, Nicole. So, you know, as I've said, this movement, which likely did start out as just some, and a very few number, we're talking really 10 or 15% of the truckers out there are upset about vaccines. But as I said, it's not the vaccines. It's the fact that our own egoic existence is heavily tied to our way of life, our civilization. And as I've talked about before, Nicole, and for all of you, we are not separate from nature. We are deeply rooted and connected to nature, no different than a deer, no different than an eagle, no different than a burrowing mouse. But we attempt to deny, and we bury that connection under a facade that we call civilization, a false reality that we've built on top of this Maya, this illusion. And what we're seeing is the playing out of a whole bunch of different factors. So these people, for them, the vaccine was a straw that breaks the camel's back. The cost of living's gone up, the pressures of work have gone up, the quality of the roads they're on are horrendous most times. The infrastructure's crumbling all over the country. The list goes on. They have a right to be upset in their minds, and they are also at the same time, consciously or otherwise, fearful of the way things are going. And given a little bit of a catalyst, this fear and anger is now used and directed. So imagine this large volume of anger and fear being injected into the egoic human cloud. Anyone who's tuned into that frequency is actually eager to hear it. They're already vibrating in that place. And when we look at the overall numbers, we're talking about a minuscule percentage of the population who is involved in this. But here's where the danger lays, okay? And then we're going to talk about what to do about it. So where the danger lay is this movement has been subsumed. It's been taken over by a right-wing separatist party. They're the ones actually driving it. They're the ones who have control of the money that's currently frozen. And like attracts like. There are lots of people who are fearful and angry in every country. And since the US is close by, of course, some of those are taking an opportunity to come here too. And you have groups that are so angry and so fearful that they are bent on destruction. Now, one of the things that can happen is this group mentality, and again, this is a very weak way of explaining what's deeply going on, but it serves well enough that this can actually spread. So you get a large number of angry, fearful people in one place. It's like piling a bunch of sticks of dynamite together and then starting to toss matches at it. Sooner or later, one of those matches is likely to light a fuse. And if more fuses get lit, it can begin to spread like a wave, and destruction and chaos reigns. That's an absolute possibility. The important thing we need to remember here is these are not bad people. These are our brothers and sisters who are not taking the right approach to this, but at the same time are afraid and angry and upset and worried. A lot of them have children and are honestly concerned and worried about their children. This is where we who are sitting and not being willing to get pulled along into that fearful, angry consciousness it is, as a lot of times in history, it is parading under the guise of unity. But it's not unity. It's not unity at all. But it is up to us not to react to that behavior, to instead hold compassion in our hearts, to take the time to meditate during the demonstration, to put that vibration of peace and love and understanding out. That to me will have a far greater effect. People are afraid. And when people get afraid, the first response is anger. And when that fear grows and when that fear is piled upon and used and subtly directed, I'm going to make a subtle little prediction right now that either GoFundMe is going to be smart enough to not give them that money and it's going to be shunted off into charities, or most of the money is going to magically disappear. You know, our civilization always has, in reality, only two choices, and this really applies to any one of us. Is what we're doing supportive of moving the whole of humanity ahead? Is it supportive of seeing the truth of our wholeness and our oneness? Or is it doing the opposite of that? Is it driving a stake in the ground and trying to hold humanity back somewhere? We are at a pivotal point in our history where a lot of these so-called biblical and other prophecies of Nostradamus, numerous others, really appear to be coming true. And before you get all wigged out and think, okay, now Garhen's gone right off his rocker with the Book of Revelation stuff, you know, I got to say this. One of the most interesting things about prophecy is it's not that difficult. It doesn't take a lot to see that if humanity behaves in the way that it normally behaves, that this is going to be the outcome. Now, sure, certain events are different, like I had talked about in my predictions video regarding exactly what we're seeing right now with Russia but if you look in the back channel news, China's been still poking at Taiwan. The point being is that all prophecy is not judgment about what's going to happen, but it's a warning of what could happen unless we wake ourselves to a higher level of consciousness. And this would be my message, you know, is that right now there are a lot of people who are going to show up that are angry and upset, and there are a lot of people who have now taken, in a normal egoic fashion, taken the way they feel and put the blame for the way they feel on someone else, whether it's the prime minister or a cop standing in front of them blocking the way, or whatever the case may be. They put the blame on that thing outside of themselves. And now a real problem develops. Because now those people can have a target for that. But on top of that, there are the people who have their own agenda, who exist to ignite more chaos, more violence. You know, the one thing about the power and control structure on the planet is that everyone wants more power and control. And when you fully understand that all of your power is tied up in the realization and the full realization of the control in the only place you've ever had it, and that is within your own being. You have no control of those things outside of yourself. But you can choose how to respond. And we as a civilization are being given the opportunity to respond. Each of us as individuals. To look at these events and see what they really are. A crying out for help. We know in the school system, for example, that when a child will strike out, a lot of times that striking out is a mere reflection of the striking into that they feel is happening to them. This is really no different. An injured animal behaves the same way, and we would like to think we're really above the animals, but I can tell you in so many ways they're a hell of a lot more connected and smarter than we are. at the end of the day, we get to choose how we respond. Can we look upon love with those people? Which does not mean putting up with abuse. It does not mean wading in and inviting the abuse either. But can we look with them upon love and peace in our hearts and an understanding of what's happening? Because being upset, being angry, and pushing back is no different. It's exactly the same energy. It's drawing that exact same frequency. And if you're feeling that frequency, you need to, you don't want to dissociate. What you want to do is you want to tune your receiver to a more loving channel. And the best way to do that is to take in what you see without judgment and return love, transmit love. The vibration of love that you transmit rolls your receiver dial over and moves you closer and closer to your own incoming stream of love. You are the source of that. With a little luck, there'll be nothing serious that comes out of this, but on the other hand, it's very indicative of the way the civilization is going. And as I said many times since my predictions 2022 video, 5 to 8 years, we're witnessing now the slow beginnings of the breakdown of civilization, and a lot of them aren't that slow. Don't be afraid. The writing has always been on the wall anyways. But through the way we choose to respond, by the way we choose to exercise our personal power, the only true power any of us has, this will determine what our new society will look like one day. It will determine whether we have a world to return to again and again and again. Just checking my list. Yeah, so as these power plays begin to play out across the planet, there's going to be more and more opportunity to be co-opted because of the channel that you're tuning into as a mobile receiver transmitter. There's going to be a lot more opportunity to be co-opted into a sort of a mini mass consciousness situation. And this is something that happens like if you're not very aware of it, it can literally subsume you. It can literally draw you in and change the dial on your transmitter and receiver. And in this case, it dials the receiver to this group consciousness. And depending on your own state of being and your own realization of your own personal power, if you're surrounded by a whole lot of people, you can literally be taken over and be swept up and taken along with it. And this will begin to play out more and more and more as the ego begins to exhibit more and more cracks in its shell. And we're witnessing that writ large right now. This is not just happening here. This is happening across the globe. We're in very interesting times. And I want you to know that you chose to be here now. When I died the first time, that was one of the most profound pieces of knowledge I was given, and I found it to be a great gift and a great source of reassurance that the I that I was before I was the I that was born here made a choice to come back exactly now, during this time. You didn't do it from a place of fear, because then you wouldn't have come. You did it from a place of power and assurance, and with a smile on your face, knowing it was going to be one hell of a ride. Open yourself to acceptance. Open yourself to love. Open yourself to that deeper, quiet voice within you. Have a beautiful night. You are loved and you are safe. Namaste. Take care. We'll talk again very soon. Oh, and one more thing. P.S. I got my bottom teeth.